And there, hanging on the handle, was a hawk! Hi, Terry here, and welcome to Times Gone Tech. Hey, you ever wonder how people lit their homes up at night before electricity was harnessed? Well, then, this is your lucky day, or rather, your lucky night. Today, we walk into a dark room and we flip a switch, or we clap, or we just say lights on, and the room is illuminated as bright and cheery as the Palace of Versailles, and we don't even think about it. Today, pretty much anyone has or can have electric lights for just pennies a day. A typical 60-watt incandescent or LED light bulb like this can generate as much visible light as 100 candles. So if you have a typical ceiling mounted light with 4 60-watt light bulbs, that's putting out about the same amount of visible light as 400 candles. Now, before any of you science nerds out there point out that's not exactly how it works, I know, but you get the point. This is a lot better light source than this. And 400 candles is still a lot of candles. So you might think at first that candles as a light source really suck. But do they really? And bigger question is, did our ancestors even actually use them? Well, if you believe the movies, everybody did. But did they really? And if they didn't, then what did they use? Lighting a room at night has always been a little problematic before these were invented. The very first nightlight, of course, was the full moon. Now, having grown up in the heart of the Ozarks back in the 1960s, before yard lights were invented, I can testify as to how much light the full moon can produce. In fact, I remember many a night sitting out in the backyard reading comic books simply by the light of the full moon. So it works a couple of days out of every month, and assuming the weather is clear. The very first practical night light was this, the campfire. Now, this would be positioned at the center of the camp, or inside the roundhouse, or the front of the cave, wherever the family lived. Now, it generated light against the dark, it generated heat against the cold, and it generated security, keeping the night predators at bay. But if I needed to walk outside of its immediate environment, it's not very portable. Then, about 70,000 years ago, some genius in Mesopotamia invented this, the oil lamp. The first oil lamps were even more simple than this. They were actually just maybe a stone or a little piece of ceramic with a shallow depression in the center, which would be filled with some kind of vegetable oil or animal oil. They would lay a small fibrous wick in it and light it, and that was their lamp. This one is a little more evolved. It dates from about 1300 BC, the land of the Canaanites. And as you can see, it's now taken on more of a specific purpose, an actual shape of a lamp. This very quickly evolved into this, which dates from about the time of King Herod. And you can notice that now it's got a little handle on it here for carrying around if you want to. The reservoir is a little more enclosed, so you've got a little less chance of spilling it. And the wick is a little bigger and more of a vertical orientation now. But basically, they function exactly the same. and they are surprisingly efficient. Put out a good amount of light. In fact, I'm filming this right now just exclusively from the light being put out by these two oil lamps. So you can see it would be fairly easy to illuminate even a large room with a dozen or so of these. Then in the early 1700s, an even better design came along. As you can see, it still has an oil reservoir down here at the bottom. The wick is now flat and it's vertical and it's fully adjustable. And it's enclosed in this glass globe to keep the wind out. But as much more sophisticated as this looks than these two older oil lamps, all three of them function exactly the same. Now, the only thing is, with this wick now being flat like this and vertical, it can no longer use the same heavier vegetable and animal oils as these older lamps could. It requires a lighter, thinner, more highly refined type of fuel. And that fuel is kerosene. Kerosene is refined from petroleum. And in fact, it was actually the only product that anybody wanted from petroleum. There was a byproduct produced by the refining of kerosene that was so volatile and flammable that basically nobody knew what to do with it. So they just poured it out onto the ground. The glorious days before environmental impact studies. That byproduct, by the way, was known as gasoline. Oil lamps are portable. They put out a good amount of light, and they are adjustable, fully adjustable up and down. And they do illuminate the immediate environment pretty well. The very first true candle was invented by the ancient Romans. And they took either thin strips of papyrus or tightly rolled little tubes of papyrus and dipped it in beeswax. And I just happen to have one right here that I made a couple of days ago. And yes, this is made from real papyrus. This is real Egyptian papyrus made in Egypt by a real Egyptian, I guess. Oh. I haven't actually tried this out yet, so let's give it a shot and see how it works. There we go. Now, as you can see, it's actually working fairly well. Well, here we go. Sort of. Probably take some time to get going. Now, the only real problem with these candles was that they don't always work, and only the emperor could afford them. But while the Romans invented the idea of the candle, beeswax was still very rare and expensive and remained within the realm of the wealthy, mostly the upper nobility and the church. Most ordinary people had to make do with things like rush lights and oil lamps. The very first candle, like this one, that we really think of today as a candle, really didn't come around until around 1850. And that's when another byproduct of refining petroleum into lubricating oil was discovered. And that substance was paraffin. Now, paraffin, unlike gasoline, revolutionized the candle industry virtually overnight and made it possible for average people to afford good, inexpensive, clean burning candles. But even still, oil lamps like this remained more popular among the average people than even wax candles, because once a candle burns up, it's gone. Whereas when the oil in this reservoir burns up, I can just add more oil. As the wick burns, I can simply adjust it up, and when it's gone, I can just insert a new wick. Plus, with the globe, it's much more resistant to wind than this is, and it doesn't drip wax all over everything like this one does. But of course, in the movies, Candles seem to turn up everywhere. You see everybody carrying candelabras down dark corridors in castles, right? And, they show up in pretty much every single Frankenstein movie ever made.
Stay close to the candles. The staircase can be treacherous.
Although sometimes not even Baron Frankenstein could afford to actually light them. So, from Roman times right up until the invention of electricity, oil lamps have really been more common than candles. Candles have always been reserved for the elite, the wealthy aristocrats, the church, or reserved for special occasions. Candlelight is interesting. It can set a romantic, relaxing, even a sinister mood. It's a dim light that can be hard on the eyes for doing detailed work like reading, but once one gets used to the lower level of illumination, it's amazing how well one can find one's way around even a big old dark manor house. Now, like most people today, I have become spoiled with my 60-watt LED lights and my handy wall switch. Oh, that's better. But I still like to keep a handy supply of oil, lamps, wicks, and candles on hand, just for our good friend, just in case. Prepping isn't all about MREs and bullets. And anyway, this is kind of fun. So, anyways, thanks for watching. Tune in next time and see you then.